The rainy day encounter, the autumn rain, fell steadily on Central Park, creating a gentle symphony against the colorful leaves that carpeted the winding paths. The sky hung low and gray, wrapping the city in a soft blanket of melancholy that seemed to match the mood of one particular man sitting alone on a weathered wooden bench. David Morrison had always been described as untouchable. At 35, he commanded boardrooms with the same ease. Most people ordered coffee. His steel-gray eyes could freeze a negotiation or close a $1 million deal with a single glance. Today, however, those same eyes held nothing but emptiness. As he stared at the worn photograph in his trembling hands, the picture showed two children laughing in a backyard swing set, their arms wrapped around each other in innocent joy. David's younger self beamed at the camera, while his older sister Rebecca held him protectively. She had been his everything after their parents died in a car accident when he was 12. Rebecca raised him, sacrificed her dreams to put him through college, and celebrated every success as if it were her own. 3 days ago, cancer had taken her away from him forever. The funeral had been a cold affair, filled with business associates offering hollow condolences and distant relatives who barely knew Rebecca's name. After everyone left, David found himself truly alone for the first time in his life. The rain seemed fitting for his mood as he sat there, not caring that his expensive suit was getting soaked or that his usual composure had completely crumbled, lost in his grief.
Ow.
David barely noticed the sound of small footsteps splashing through. Puddles nearby, a gentle voice pierced through his dark thoughts like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Mommy, look at that sad man over there." David glanced up to see a little girl with bouncing blonde curls peeking out from under a bright pink knit hat. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with rosy cheeks and eyes that sparkled with curiosity and kindness. Her small hand was tucked safely inside her mother's as they walked along the path, but her attention was completely focused on David. "Emma, sweetheart, we shouldn't stare," her mother said softly, though her voice carried warmth rather than scolding. David's eyes shifted to the woman speaking. She was beautiful in a natural, effortless way that no amount of money could buy. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore scrubs underneath a practical raincoat. That suggested she worked in healthcare. There were gentle lines around her green eyes that spoke of someone who smiled often, though concern creased her brow as she looked at David's obviously distressed state. Before her mother could stop her, little Emma pulled free and marched directly toward David's bench with the fearless determination that only children possess. She stopped right in front of him, studying his face with the intense seriousness of someone trying to solve an important puzzle. "You look really, really sad," she announced matter-of-factly, tilting her head to one side. "Are you crying because of the rain?" David found himself speechless. When was the last time someone had asked him such a direct, honest question in his world of corporate politics and carefully crafted responses? Emma's innocent directness was both refreshing and completely disarming. "Emma, honey, come back here," her mother called, hurrying toward them with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, sir." She's very friendly and doesn't understand boundaries yet. But Emma wasn't finished. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a well-loved teddy bear with mismatched button eyes and fur that had been worn soft from countless hugs. Without hesitation, she held it out to David with both hands. "Here, take my teddy," she said with the absolute confidence of someone offering the most precious gift in the world. "Mr. Buttons always makes me feel better when I'm sad," Mommy says. "Hugs help too, but Mr. Buttons is better because he stays with you all night." David stared at the offered teddy bear, completely overwhelmed by the simple generosity of this tiny stranger. His throat tightened with emotion as he looked between the worn toy and Emma's earnest face. How could a child he'd never met see his pain so clearly when the adults in his life barely noticed his existence beyond business meetings? "Emma, we really should let this gentleman have his privacy," her mother said gently. Though David noticed she didn't sound angry, just cautious. She placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder and gave David a polite but wary smile. "I'm Claire Hartwell, and this is my daughter Emma. I apologize for disturbing you." "Please," David managed to say, his voice rougher than he intended. "Shh, not disturbing anything." He looked down at Emma, who was still patiently holding out her teddy bear. "What's your bear's full name?" Emma's face lit up with delight at the question. His name is Mr. Buttons Theodore Snuggles, but I just call him Mr. Buttons because that's easier. He's very good at keeping nightmares away, and he knows the best bedtime stories. Do you have nightmares? The question hit David like a physical blow. He thought of the sleepless nights since Rebecca's diagnosis, the dreams where she was still alive and healthy, only to wake up to the crushing reality of her absence. Yes, he admitted quietly. I have nightmares sometimes. Emma nodded, sagely, as if this explained everything. And you definitely need Mr. Buttons. But just for tonight, okay? I might need him back tomorrow because tomorrow is my first day at a new school and I get scared of new places. David's heart clenched at her innocent trust. This child was willing to give up her comfort object to a complete stranger, simply because she recognized his pain. When had anyone in his adult life shown him such pure, uncomplicated kindness? I don't think I can take something so important, David said carefully. Mr. Buttons belongs with you. Emma considered this seriously, then brightened with a new idea. Okay, but you can borrow him for a little bit right now. Maybe you could tell me why you're so sad. A teacher says talking about feelings helps them get smaller. Claire looked mortified. Emma, that's a very personal question. Not everyone wants to share their feelings with strangers. But David found himself wanting to answer. There was something about Emma's genuine concern that made him want to be honest in a way he hadn't been with anyone in months. Lost someone. Very important to me, he said simply. My sister. She was the only family I had left, and now she's gone. Emma's eyes filled with sympathetic tears. That's the saddest thing ever. I would cry forever if something happened to my mommy. Was your sister nice, like my mommy? She was the nicest person in the world, David replied, surprised to find that talking about Rebecca didn't hurt quite as much as he'd expected. She took care of me when I was little, just like your mommy takes care of you, and she must have. Loved you very, very much, Emma said with absolute certainty. My mommy says that when people love us, they never really go away because they stay in our hearts forever. The simple wisdom of her words broke something open inside David's chest. He accepted the teddy bear with hands that shook slightly, holding it as carefully as if it were made of precious glass. Thank you, Emma, he whispered. This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time. Emma beamed with pride, then impulsively reached out and patted David's arm with her small hand. Don't worry, mister. I think your sister is watching over you from heaven, and she probably wants you to be happy again. That's what mommies and sisters do. Claire watched this exchange with wonder, seeing her usually shy daughter display a level of empathy and maturity that amazed her. There was something about this man that called to Emma's naturally compassionate nature. And despite her initial wariness, Claire found herself moved by his obvious grief and gratitude. We should probably get going, Claire said gently, though she found herself reluctant to leave this sad stranger alone in the rain. Emma has an early bedtime, especially with school starting tomorrow. David nodded, understanding but feeling strangely disappointed. For a few minutes, Emma's innocent chatter had made him feel less alone than he had in weeks. Of course, he said, starting to hand back the teddy bear. No, keep Mr. Buttons tonight, Emma insisted. He'll keep the nightmares away. But tomorrow, you have to bring him to the park so I can introduce you properly. Mr. Buttons doesn't like being with strangers. For too long, David couldn't help but smile, the first genuine smile he'd managed since Rebecca's funeral. I promised to take very good care of him. As Claire and Emma walked away, Emma turned back several times to wave at David, who found himself waving back. Despite his usual reserve, he watched until they disappeared around a bend in the path and looked down at the teddy bear in his hands. For the first time in days, the crushing weight of loneliness felt just a little bit lighter. Unexpected bonds. David Morrison had never imagined that keeping a promise to a 5-year-old would become the most important appointment of his day. Yet here he was, sitting on the same park bench where he'd met Emma and Claire, carefully holding Mr. Buttons and checking his watch every few minutes. He'd barely slept the night before. But for once, it wasn't because of grief. Instead, he found himself thinking about Emma's bright smile and Claire's gentle concern, wondering if they would actually show up. He'd even canceled a board meeting, much to his assistant's shock, claiming he had an urgent personal matter to attend to. The truth was, for the first time since Rebecca's death, David had something to look forward to. "Mr. Sadman, you came back." Emma's joyful voice rang across the park as she spotted David on the bench. She broke free from her mother's hand and ran toward him with the uninhibited enthusiasm of childhood. Her new school backpack bouncing with each step, David's face transformed with a smile that felt rusty from disuse. "I promised I would, didn't I?
Ow.
And I brought someone who missed you very much." He held up Mr. Buttons, and Emma's face lit up as if she'd been reunited with a long-lost friend. She threw her arms around both David and the teddy bear in an enthusiastic hug that caught him completely off guard. "Mr. Buttons, did you keep the nightmares away?" she asked seriously, taking the bear and examining him as if checking for any signs of damage. "He was the perfect companion," David assured her. "He's very good at keeping bad dreams at bay, just like you said." Claire approached more slowly, looking pleasantly surprised to see David waiting for them. She wore jeans and a soft yellow sweater. That made her eyes look even greener, and David noticed she looked less tired than she had the day before. "I wasn't sure you'd actually be here," she admitted with a shy smile. "Emma talked about you all through dinner and again this morning. She was convinced you needed a friend." "She wasn't wrong," David said quietly, standing to greet them properly. "I'm David Morrison, by the way. I realized yesterday that I never properly introduced myself." "Claire Hartwell," she replied, shaking his offered hand. Her grip was firm and warm, speaking of someone accustomed to caring for others. "And you've already met my chatterbox daughter. How was your first day at the new school, Emma?" David asked, genuinely interested. Emma's face scrunched up in concentration as she considered the question. "It was scary at first because I didn't know anyone. But then I remembered what you said about your sister taking care of you, and I pretended she was there with me. It made me feel braver." David felt his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "That was very wise of you. I think Rebecca would have liked that idea." "Rebecca was your sister's name?" Claire asked gently. "That's a beautiful name. She was a beautiful person," David replied, surprised by how natural it felt to talk about her with these relative strangers. "She would have loved Emma, she always said children see the world more clearly than adults because they haven't learned to be cynical yet." Emma tugged on David's sleeve to get his attention. "Are you still sad about Rebecca?" David considered the question carefully. "Yes, I'm still sad. But yesterday you reminded me that sadness doesn't have to be the only thing I feel. Rebecca wouldn't want me to stop being happy forever." "That's good," Emma nodded approvingly. Sad. Feelings need to have happy feelings to balance them out, like when I eat vegetables so I can have dessert." Claire laughed at her daughter's logic. "Emma has very strong opinions about emotional balance, as you can see. She's clearly a philosopher," David said with amusement. "Have you ever considered a career in counseling, Emma?" Emma giggled at. "The idea, I don't know what that means, but if it means helping sad people feel better, then yes, I'm very good at that. Mommy says I have a gift." "Your mommy is absolutely right," David agreed, glancing at Claire with genuine admiration. "She's raised an extraordinary daughter." Claire's cheeks flushed pink at the compliment. "Thank you. She's definitely the best thing I've ever done with my life. Though I can't take all the credit, Emma just came into this world with an old soul and a big heart." They settled onto the bench together, Emma perched between the two adults, chattering happily about her new teacher, the playground equipment, and her plans to invite David to her upcoming 6th birthday party. David found himself drawn into her innocent enthusiasm, asking questions about her favorite subjects and listening intently to her detailed descriptions of her classmates. Claire watched this interaction with growing amazement. Emma was typically shy around new adults, especially men, but she seemed completely at ease with David. More than that, she appeared to have adopted him as a special project, determined to ensure his happiness with the same fierce protectiveness she usually reserved for injured birds and lost puppies. "Emma, sweetheart, maybe Mr. David has other places he needs to be today," Claire suggested gently, when Emma started planning their next meeting. "Actually," David said, surprising himself with his boldness, "I was wondering if you both might like to get some hot chocolate. There's a cafe near here that makes excellent cocoa, and Emma looks like she could use warming up after her first day at school." Emma's eyes went wide with excitement. Hot chocolate? With marshmallows? All the marshmallows you want, David promised, then looked at Claire questioningly. If that's okay with your mom, of course. Claire hesitated for a moment, her protective instincts warring with her growing sense that David was genuinely kind, despite being essentially a stranger. Emma's obvious comfort with him went a long way toward easing her concerns. And she found herself curious about this sad, gentle man who had somehow earned her daughter's fierce loyalty in a single afternoon. That sounds lovely, she agreed. But just for a little while, Emma has homework to do. The cafe was warm and cozy, filled with the rich scent of coffee and fresh pastries. David chose a corner table where they could watch the rain beginning to fall again outside the large windows. Emma immediately launched into a detailed explanation of her homework assignment, while Claire and David exchanged amused glances over her head. She's quite the storyteller, David observed as Emma paused to take a breath between sentences. She gets that from her father, Claire said, then immediately looked like she regretted mentioning him. He was very good with words. David noticed the past tense and the slight tension that entered Claire's voice, but he didn't pry. Everyone had stories they weren't ready to share, and he respected that better than most. What do you do for work, Claire? He asked instead, genuinely curious about this woman who had raised such a remarkable daughter. I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital, she replied, her face brightening with professional pride. I work mostly with kids who are dealing with chronic illnesses. It's challenging, but incredibly rewarding. That explains Emma's natural empathy, David said thoughtfully. She's learned from watching you care for others. Claire smiled, touched by his insight. What about you? What do you do when you're not sitting in parks rescuing teddy bears from overly generous children? David chuckled. I'm in business, corporate, consulting, mainly. It's not nearly as interesting as pediatric nursing, I'm afraid. He didn't mention that he owned one of the largest consulting firms in the city, or that his business involved advising Fortune 500 companies and managing investments worth millions of dollars. Something told him that Claire wouldn't be impressed by his wealth and status. He found her lack of recognition refreshing. Emma finished her hot chocolate and promptly climbed into David's lap, apparently considering him a permanent fixture. In her life now, she showed him her homework assignment, a drawing of her family, and David's heart clenched when he saw that she'd drawn 3 figures: herself, mother, and a tall man in a suit holding Mr. Buttons. Is this me? He asked, pointing to the 3rd figure. Yes. You're my friend now. So you're part of my family drawing. Mrs. Peterson says family doesn't always mean people who live in the same house. Sometimes it means people who care about you.
David
Looked at Claire over Emma's head, seeing his own emotion reflected in her eyes. This little girl had just casually redefined his entire understanding of what family could mean. I'm honored to be in your family drawing, Emma, he said seriously. That might be the nicest gift anyone has ever given me. As the afternoon faded into evening, David found himself reluctant to say goodbye. For the first time since Rebecca's death, he hadn't thought about his grief for hours at a time. Instead, he'd been completely absorbed in Emma's stories and Claire's gentle humor, feeling more like himself than he had in months. Can we see you again tomorrow? Emma asked as they prepared to leave. David looked at Claire questioningly. I don't want to impose on your routine. You're not imposing, Claire said softly. Emma's right, you could use a friend. And to be honest, so could we. Emma slipped her small hand into David's with natural trust, chattering about her plans for their next adventure. David felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. For the first time since losing Rebecca, David Morrison wasn't dreading tomorrow. Instead, he was looking forward to whatever new joy a wise little girl and her remarkable mother might bring into his carefully ordered world. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important business meetings were the ones that happened on park benches with teddy bears and children who saw straight through to your soul.